What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir mentor. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty excited about this video. Today we are going to get our edit gist button functional. And if you missed my live stream where I refactored our create gist form into a live component, you should check that out. I'll link that on the screen now because we will be using that live component to edit our created gist. Let's go ahead and open up our project. Command space terminal. And I'm going to cd into, my project, which is in documents, develop Elixir mentor, and then Elixir gist. And then let's just open that up in VS Code. I'm going to just close all these windows. Let's just make sure that our Postgres Docker container is running. Okay, mine is. If yours isn't, go ahead and start that up. And then let's go ahead and just start our project with mix space phx.server. So let's go to our local host 4000. And I think we should have, no, we don't. Maybe I have it in Brave. Let's see, local host 4000. Okay, we have to log in. So Jacob at elixirmentor.com and then Elixir Mentor. If you noticed, that view is pretty now. And I just went ahead and updated all the UI because I figured it wasn't worth wasting an entire video on just making things pretty, because honestly, just updating HTML and Tailwind stuff, I think we've done a lot of that and we're still going to do more. So I made the built-in login, account creation, all that good stuff. I went ahead and just did that, and that's pushed to the Git repo. So if you want to check it out, feel free. Okay, so I just want to quickly navigate to an existing gist, and I think I have some up here. Okay, cool. And you'll see we have our awesome syntax highlighted in here. And in previous videos, we got our delete and copy buttons working. Now we want to make the edit button here toggle our UI. So we either want it to edit our gist or we want it to show our syntax highlighted code snippet like it is here. Now we could do this two ways. We could handle an event and toggle a Boolean value in our assigns map, which requires hitting our server to update UI. And we learned we don't want to do that. So we should figure out how to toggle our HTML divs with a JS hook. Let's first get our live component showing up in our view. So let's go ahead and open up our create gist live.hex file. And let's just go ahead and copy our live component line here. And then let's jump over to our gist live html.hex file. And let's see here, right above our entire syntax gist area, right here, let's go ahead and paste that live component. And then if we save it and go back to, let's see, live component is undefined. Okay, so we have to alias in our live component in our liveview.ex file. So let's go to our gist live.ex, and we want to alias in our component just like we did in our create gist live view. So if we just copy that, or you can just type it out, we'll just do that. So when we save that, and now going back to Firefox, or I think I had Brave pulled up, there we go. Now you see that we have our live component above our syntax highlighting code, which is cool. This is what we want. It's showing our live view works. And let's see, when we type, we see line numbers. Awesome. But we don't want both of these showing at the same time, right? So let's go back to our gistlive.html.hex file. And one thing I want to point out here, we're passing in an ID with this component, Atom new. And we're going to be updating an existing gist. So I think we should just pass in the gist ID here now. And as long as if we had multiple create gist forms on a page, this ID would need to be unique. But in our case, it will be if we're just going to grab our gist that we have and pass in the ID, which is fine. And then we're not creating a new gist, we're editing. Now we want to hide the syntax section and show the create gist form. And on a fresh load, we want the opposite. If we wrap our live component in a div with an ID so we can reference it from our hook, and then we can set our style attribute to display none. So I'm going to just go ahead and create a div here. And inside this div, let's create an ID. And our ID can be, we'll call this the edit section. And then we also want to set our style attribute here. And our style attribute can just be display :none. And then that will automatically hide this div. So if I go ahead and cut this and place it in this div, now when we go back to our browser, it's no longer showing up, it's hidden, which is what we want. And then we can do the same thing. We want to wrap our entire syntax block that is underneath here in the same thing. So let's create a div and we'll make an ID for it. And we'll call this one the syntax section. And then the style attribute, we want to set display to block. And then everything inside of this div, I'm just going to copy this or cut this closing div, and we're going to go all the way to the bottom and place it. I think that's, yeah, place it at the very bottom and then save it. And now if we go back to our browser, everything still looks the way we expect it. So we're successfully hiding our live component, but now we want our JS hook to toggle our style attribute. So if we open up if we go into assets, JS, and open up our app.js file, now we want to create another hook. And right underneath our copy to clipboard hook, let's go ahead and just do, we'll say hooks dot, and we'll call this toggle edit, and then set that equal to, and then do opening and closing curly braces. And then we need to call our mounted function. And inside our mounted function, we can grab, let's see, we're going to be grabbing an event listener off of click because we're going to be clicking our edit button, and our edit button is right here. So we're clicking that, and it's the same as our copy, the same way we did our copy button. So if we go up above here, you see our event listener click, and then we can grab the attribute div by the ID that we set it to. So if we go ahead and just say this.element.add event listener, and our event listener is a click listener, and then we need to go ahead and just inside of this callback, we want to grab our edit section. So we can create a variable called edit, and then we can grab that variable with document.getElementById, and then we can get it because we named it the ID edit-section. So now we have access to changing our style attribute on edit. And then let's also grab our syntax div the same way. So document.getElementById, and this is syntax-section. All right, so now all we have to do, as long as edit and syntax are not nil, so let's go ahead and say if edit and syntax, if they exist, we need to just set the style attribute display opposite of what it is. So edit.style.display equals, it is currently none. We're going to set it to block. And then our syntax, syntax div style display is currently block and we want it to be none. All right, so on a fresh load, our style is going to be none and block. So it's automatically going to work the way we want it to on a fresh load. When we hit the edit button, it's going to swap them. So our edit form is going to show and not the syntax highlighting, which is exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and save this now and go back to our gistlive.heeks file. And now we have to go find our edit button. So we have our delete button here and we have our edit button right here. And we currently have a phx dash click event here. We don't want that one anymore. We're going to delete that and we want our phx dash hook. And then our hook just needs to call our hook name, which is toggle edit like that. So if I save this now and we go back to our browser, what did I do? Let's see. Hook requires, we need an ID. We just need to add an ID to this button, which is fine. We will call this button ID, let's see. We'll call it the edit button. All right, and now save it. And if we go back to our browser, now we see our code here. When I click edit, it should show our create gist form. Look at that. That's really cool. This is pretty sweet. Seeing our form show up. Now we do have a few things we have to adjust with our live component. The first one is we need to load our gist data to edit, right? So we need our description, our title, and our code snippet to show up here in the fields to edit. So currently we're setting our form to an empty change set in the mount function. We can't do that anymore, but we still need it to be empty when we're creating a gist. So we need to pass our form in with the component. So let's go ahead and find our form component. Let's see, our gist form. So right up here, if we open up our gist form component.ex, in our mount function, we have our form right here getting assigned to an empty gist change set. So go ahead and cut that out of there. We're just going to pass our socket through. We can actually delete this whole thing and just pass our socket through. So save that. And then what we want to do is go to our create gist heeks file. Let's see, create gist heeks. And just like we were passing in the user here, we can pass in our form. So we want form equals just like that. And this is Elixir code, so we have to put it inside of curly braces. So now we're setting our form here to an empty change set, and it's yelling at us because we have to create an alias for our gist struct. So let's see if we pull up our create gist or create gist. Here we go, and we just need to alias our Elixir gist dot gists dot gist struct. Whoop, if I can type, there we go. And you know, honestly, what we should do right now, since we're not doing anything in our create gist live.ex anymore, we could get rid of our .heeks file. So why don't we do that actually? If we come to our create gist.heeks file, go ahead and copy everything here. So copy that, and let's go back to our create gist. And all we're going to do is do our def render function and pass in our assigns. And then we just have to return our heeks tag, just like here. So you do the tilde h and then triple quotations. So we're going to do that in our create gist. Whoop, I'm getting lost here. All right, so we're going to just do tilde h and then our triple. There we go. And then paste our HTML in here. Oh, we also have to alias in our gists context file. So we'll just do this, gists. Okay, now everything will be done yelling at us, I believe. Enjoying the video? Show some love with a like and hit subscribe to stay updated. To support me and keep the content free, click join for memberships or pick up a course at elixirmentor.com and get free access to my private community. Let's jump back in. And now let's go ahead and just delete the create.gist.heeks file. And now back over here. All right, so we just refactored our create.gist LiveView.ex file. And if we go to our browser now, form not found. Oh, so the fact we removed form from the mount of our live view, it's yelling at us in our gist form here. So let's scroll down. No, our gist live. Here we go. So where we're passing in our live component in where we're editing, where we're trying to edit, we just have to add our form here now. Whoop. So let's go ahead and steal this live component like this, or just copy this form piece like this. And when we're back in our gist, we just have to pass in our form. But instead of passing in an empty gist, we can pass in our gist from our assigns map. All right, and now if we go back to our browser, everything's loading the way it's supposed to. And let's just make sure our create gist form is still working. It is, so that's good. Us moving the HTML into the liveview.ex file, we're still good. And now the fact that we're passing in our form with our gist data, when we hit our edit button, our form should have all the data in it. Look at that. So that's pretty sweet. We have our description here, we have our file name, and then we have our code snippet. Now, we do have one little problem. If we change our data and then we push the create gist button, it's going to create a new gist and not update our gist. So we actually need to refactor our gist form component a little bit. So let's go ahead and jump back into our code and let's go to our gist form component. And if we go underneath our render function here, we have our handle event create. And all we're doing is calling our create event because in our form up here, our phx submit is calling create. And we don't need to change that, but we do need to change how we're handling things in our handle event. What we need to do is check for our gist in our assigns map. If the gist has an ID, that means we need to update the gist. If the gist ID is nil, that means we need to create a gist because the ID hasn't been created yet by Ecto, right? So what we can do here is let's go ahead and create two private functions. We're going to do def p, and this is going to be called create gist, and it's going to take in params and our socket. And we're going to create another function, private, called update gist, and it will also take params and our socket. All right, so inside the create gist, we can just copy and paste what we're doing, or cut and paste what we're already doing in our handle event and put that here. And then in our update gist, we can do the same thing. We can create our case and we can call gists context file dot and then call update gist. Now we do need to update our context file here because it currently is just going to update, but we want to pass in our current user and the parameters that we want to update the gist with. So if we jump over to our context file, which is, let's see, in the Elixir gist, and then in the gists.ex file. And then we want to scroll down to update gist. We want to, instead of passing a gist in here, we want to pass in our user struct and then the attributes that we want to update, right? And then right underneath here is we want to go ahead, we're going to just fetch our gist, okay, from the attributes that we're updating because we do have the ID available. So we're going to say repo.get, and we want to get a gist. And then from the attributes, we want to just go ahead and pull out the ID here. So we're fetching it by ID. And then we want to only update if the user ID that we just passed in from our current session matches our user ID that created the gist. And I'm sorry, we are pattern matching. We need a variable here. So this user has to just be a user struct. So now if I do if user.id equals gist.userid, then we'll go ahead and allow the update to happen. So we can just copy that code and then the update will happen. Now, if it doesn't, let's go ahead and do an else. We're just going to return an error tuple of unauthorized. Unauthorized. Okay. And so save that. So now we're only updating the gist if the current user owns the gist. Okay. And then if we go back to our component here, we can pass in our current user session, like creating a gist up here, and then the params that we're updating. So boom, just like that. We don't need these parentheses that got put in. And then do. All right. And then we're going to have our case statement. And obviously we're going to have our OK tuple returned that returns a gist to us. And if that happens, we can go ahead and do a no reply. And then we want to do a push patch because we're updating the current live view that we're already showing. So push patch. And we have to pass in the socket here. And then we have to give the route that we want to go to. And that path, if we do a ~p, we'll make sure it's a verified route. And then it is just going to be gist. And then we have our ID that gets passed in. So we are passing in our gist ID. Square brackets, not curly. Push patch. All right. Oh, we're forgetting quotation marks. There we go. We need to have curly braces and then the square brackets. There we go. Okay. And now we need to go ahead and handle our error tuple. So if it's an error, we're going to have an error and the message. And then inside of this, we can just go ahead and take our socket and we can do our reassign. And this is kind of what we did for the delete functionality, right? And we're going to say put flash and pass in the current socket. And then we want it to have an error message with the message passed back. So we'll get our unauthorized error. And then we can do our no reply Atom. Whoop, no reply Atom. And pass the socket back through. Someone tries to edit something they don't own, we will give them an error message. Now that we have these two functions, we need to call the proper one from our handle event create here. So up here, all we have to do is check to see if the gist that's passed in, if the ID exists, we're updating. If it doesn't exist, we're creating a new gist. So if is nil, and we're just going to say the params, and then we need to pull out our ID. So if that's nil, we need to create a gist. And then we're just going to pass in our params and our socket. And else, so if it's not nil, then we're going to update our gist and pass in our params and socket. All right, this is really, really sweet. Let's save this and let's pull up our browser. And now if I hit edit here, if I say in our description, this was updated, and that's all we'll do for now. When I hit create gist, look at that. This was updated. So now you're probably seeing something like, well, we don't want it to say create gist. We need that UI to say update gist, right? Well, this is pretty easy for us to fix. We can go ahead and pull up our live component again. So our live component, scroll up, and where we have our button, we're just going to do a very easy if-else statement, okay? And this is just for adjusting UI. So inside, since we're doing Elixir, we need to do embedded Elixir code syntax, which is less than percentage and then equals, and then we need to just close that off with a % as well, but we can do our if statement. So remember that ID that we're passing into our live component? Well, we can access that. So ID, if it equals the atom new, we want our button to say creating and create button, right? So create gist. So there we go. If it equals new, but if it doesn't, we need an else. Let's go ahead and end this as well. And now we need our updated button. So let's copy and paste this create button down here. And we want it to disable now with saying updating. And we also want this to say update gist instead of create gist. All right, so that's as easy as that. So save that. And now when we pull up our browser, when I hit edit and scroll down, it now says update gist. So that's pretty cool. And then if we go back to create a gist, it says create gist. Okay, so we do have one little issue that I just realized. Our line numbers disappeared on our syntax highlighting view, right? But when we hit edit, they're still showing up here. So what's going on? I'm going to just, we'll leave this the same, hit update. Our problem is we have our live component and our syntax highlighted component in the same window, right? So our live component is triggering our JS hook, and it has the same exact ID, the line numbers ID, that's triggering the update line numbers. And then if you come down here, we're doing the same thing with our text area, our numbers text area, calling line numbers. So the second one's never getting hit because it is finding our first component. So this is an easy fix. We're just going to name this syntax numbers as our ID. And then if we go to our app.js for update line numbers, we're going to pass in our element ID. And what we can do is just have a default setting or value, and we'll make our default line numbers. So then we don't have to fix the live component, right? And we'll pass in element ID right here. And then from our highlight JS hook, where we're getting our syntax highlighting, and then we're passing in our text content so we can get the number, the right line numbers. So we're calling our update line numbers function. Down here, we'll pass in our new div ID, which is going to be syntax numbers, I think is what we called it. And then if we save that and go back to our browser, there we go. Our line numbers are showing up. So this is working perfect. And really exciting to have this functionality here. So having the ability to use a live component in multiple places is really beneficial. It allowed us to pass our assigns values we needed access to in our component, and it gave us the ability to use the same form to either create a gist or update a gist, which is really powerful, and I think it's really cool. So as always, if you need help or want to check out the solutions, check out that GitHub link in the description. Join my Discord server, Elixir Mentor, if you have any questions or you just want to hang out and chat. That link is in the description as well. If you want to learn how to build scalable, production-ready, full-stack and REST API solutions, hit that subscribe button now. I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir Mentor. See you in the next video.